Welcome everybody to the next webinar in our webinar series, Alternatives and Simulation in Education. And we're very happy to have Dmitry Leporsky speaking today on the subject of replacement in Ukraine. So in a moment, I'll be inviting Dmitry to talk a little with us. But first, let me just pass on to Valentin Salamone, who's helping a lot with some of the technical aspects and who will also tell you about the next webinar in this series.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks Nick. So indeed, we have prepared a next webinar that will happen next month on the 14th of April at 7 p.m. and it will be on the Global Educational Hub for Animal-Free Innovation, on a mission to make education on non-animal research the norm worldwide. And our speaker for this webinar will be Janneke Hogworst, advisor at PETA. At the end of this webinar, we will share the link to register to this next session. So yes, for the moment, I will just wish you to enjoy this webinar of today and stay until the end so that you can also have access to more info.
Thank you very much, Valentin. And so a big welcome to Dmitry Leporsky, who's online from Kharkiv in the Ukraine. Dmitry, or Dima, and I met many years ago now. InterNICHE, the International Network for Humane Education, was doing a lot of outreach work in Russia, Belarus and Ukraine from the mid-1990s onwards. And we had some initial agreements with universities in Russia, such as St. Petersburg State Veterinary Academy. Amongst the work in that region of the world, including Ukraine, Dima was involved in some local and a little national work. So Dima, a big welcome to you, and do tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this topic, in this theme, please.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak globally these days, and how I got involved in the topic. Yeah, that's really a fascinating story through the years. When I was a student and I was a physiology student, I didn't want to participate in experiments on animals when I got to know about that later. And luckily, I met Brian Gunn, representative of the International Association Against Painful Experiments on Animals, from whom I discovered about alternatives. Later on, I co-organized a conference together with the Bioethics Center in Kharkiv, where Nick was invited as a speaker. So that is how I got involved in the process of learning, discovering alternatives for myself.
Thank you. And I think once you started to get more involved, you became InterNICHE national contact for the country, and also met up with some other campaigners from other countries in regional meetings, which I believe happened in Kiev and in Minsk and in one or two other places. Is that right? You came to some of those meetings?
Yeah, I came to the meetings organized in Kiev. I can remember that was a really great experience for me, an entrance to the knowledge that InterNICHE had and the practice for other countries. Yeah, I could learn a lot from there about alternatives, about the advantages of alternatives and how to demonstrate alternatives. So we were taught the basic principles of humane education, and that was really useful and played a key role in my future work in the Ukraine.
And at the time, I think Anya Yushchenko, who was a veterinary student and then a vet, was the national contact. And then at some point, you became national contact for the country. And then you got in contact with other colleagues in Germany. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Lately, we were joined and greatly supported by organization Spark, and then Doctors Against Animal Experiments joined our project, and yes, so that's how it evolved.
And I think at that point, the process of getting formal agreements across the country really mushroomed into a nationwide project, and indeed beyond.
Yes, so we combined forces, and it really allowed us to make a great job in the Ukraine, with both organizations being so active and actively helping teachers, students, and animals in the Ukraine, of course.
Okay, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the situation in Ukraine in terms of awareness, any vacuums in terms of knowledge or technology or whatever. What was the sort of background situation when you first got involved, and what did you see as the sort of challenges that needed to be overcome?
There were a lot of challenges to overcome. Yet they helped us actually in implementation of humane alternatives. Those are, for instance, the economical background. First of all, Ukraine, after the fall down of USSR, experienced great financial gap in supply from the government. For instance, when I studied at the university, there were almost no computers or just a little. And teachers had to bring the computers from home and laptops to support the educational process. That's the first aspect. Then, of course, there was almost no knowledge about the alternatives, that they actually exist. Of course, some teachers already use alternatives, for instance, self-made, self-filmed videos, or self-made models of animals, but they didn't consider it as an actual alternative in full sense of this word. So there was a vacuum in information. There was a vacuum in the benefits of alternatives. That's what we had to work with. So we had to, first of all, fill in the informational gap. That's the most important, and what we started to do.
So tell us about the process of getting formal agreements. What are all the different stages that you and others were involved in, but primarily you, in terms of getting these agreements established, and the replacement of animal experiments or dissection of purpose-killed animals? And I believe you have some slides to illustrate
sure.
the full process here for people to see.
As soon as we started talking about alternatives and humane education, we started visiting universities and how the process was organized. So it included multiple stages, actually, including 3 visits per university. The first stage was to research, and it comprised of, in the very beginning, we actually started searching for a number of universities using animals. So there are many universities in the Ukraine, but only specific of them have experiments on animals, like veterinary, medical faculties, biological faculties. So we try to figure out whom we can contact with, where we can go, and who is ready to accept us and to listen to us. And that was much appreciated, because nobody knew about, again, advantages of alternatives and the information that we could provide. So we are openly accepted by the universities, by the teachers. And then after the presentations that I gave personally as a representative of the project, there were some teachers interested. Some teachers, students, and rectors. and that was the first step towards the formal agreements. As I said, we also, at the first stage, we also organized meeting with students because we had to explain, for instance, the rights of students, or sometimes students ask us themselves that they don't want to participate in experiments on animals, and they were searching for specific alternatives in their fields. So did the teachers sometimes. They also asked us if we could help them to replace harmful animal experiments that left from the Soviet Union times. We made negotiations with teachers, students, and we did many lectures through the country. And when the actual agreement was about to sign, it's also the first stage that we always talk to the teachers and students of specific department, trying to figure out which problems they face, what specific alternatives they may need, what maybe technical requirement, technical equipment is required. Yeah, that's to figure out how we can cooperate, and can this cooperation be successful. So we wanted to suit the needs of the teachers and students, so that the final agreement would be successful for both sides. And then came the second visit for signing agreement. Typically, it's not a long period of time, maybe a few months, so that the teachers could think thoroughly about what we discussed in the first initial visit. And if they agree, if they weight all the advantages for them, and then they say, okay, we are ready to sign an agreement, please, you're welcome. And so that's how I arrived for the second time. And for that period, I had to bring with me a set of alternatives. Originally, that was some alternatives required by the teachers, but later we came to an idea that it should be a set of specific alternatives that would suit the specific discipline the most. So I was bringing the laptops, beamers, equipment needed, and alternatives needed. And sometimes it could be sent by post, but mostly I brought it by myself. At the second visit, we also signed. We were signing the agreement. Typically, it was the head of the department or a dean of the faculty who was responsible for that process. And of course, later the other sides, the organizations of Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE signed the agreements too. The agreements were sent by post then. After the signing, we gave a period of starting from a year for the first period of our project, and later on we cut it down to half a year period before the third visit. And the idea of the third visit was to control the actual implementation of the alternatives and the equipment donated, so that everything is used properly, and no broke of the conditions in terms of the agreement from the sides of the university. And it was also and it is also valuable to get feedback from the teachers if everything went okay. Do they need anything else from us? And it's also important to notice that we always say that the agreements are prolonged for unlimited time, so to say. Yeah, so we keep on supporting you. We don't leave you as soon as the agreement is signed. So we keep supporting you by, for instance, if any alternatives would be created in the Ukraine by the teachers, or we have any opportunities to provide you or support you with the grant alternatives, then it will be supported. So, sometimes teachers just didn't believe because they saw that we probably would offer them something to buy. Because they saw that the alternatives we provide, it's like an advertisement, and they have to buy it finally. That always amused, always shocked me to some extent, because I didn't expect that. I was sincerely offering free help, giving a hand from our organizations, but teachers just didn't believe it. So it sometimes was really interesting experience. Okay, so let's go further. And here you can see these images of, for instance, the initial visit, how it was happening, that the teachers were really interested and focused on what I was showing, because it was a new information for the teachers and the students. This is the slide and an image of me presenting our project to the teachers, mostly at the conference. So I was invited to the conference, national-wide conference, and they give me a word to say about the project and humane education. Next, this is the demonstration of alternatives and their benefits to the teachers and students. So that's how it typically was organized in the very beginning and later on during the initial visit. Next, you can see an example of the agreement visit, when the teacher is happy to sign a formal agreement with us, and demonstrating it to me and the public. And here's among the other examples. All the agreements are signed and stamped by either it be a department stamp or a faculty stamp or even a university stamp by the rector. Among the other examples. And here you can see the alternatives brought. So also the technical means, a laptop and a beamer, and some alternatives as well. And here you can see a brighter example of set of alternatives provided to the teachers. And very happy teachers because of the equipment they got. I can remember that it was a really huge problem for the universities, and all the teachers, of course, we were anticipating it really impatiently, calling me from time to time when it's gonna happen. So when finally they got what they wanted, they were happy to start implementing the alternatives and to lift up the level of education for the students. Besides, the Ministry of Education of Ukraine really supported and exerted even pressure to the higher institutions so that they implement modern technologies into education, especially like alternatives, for instance, and of course the technical means. Yes, and here you can see a computer class. And the alternatives implement, and that's already the third stage when we made final visit to see how everything is implemented and it's in a proper place. And you can see that everything is good, and the educational process is changed to the better, and that's how it happened. Okay. And that's an example of another university. So that's different universities across Ukraine. Originally, we started from a number of PCs, and later on switched to standard sets of equipment. So back to the overview how it evolved. Here you can see press conference organized in Kiev. As soon as we have had a number of universities that joined the project, we decided to organize a press conference, inviting the first teachers who signed formal agreements with us, so that we could give a broader information, broader overview to the public, and to give an advertisement of humane education. And I should say that it went really well. We had great interest from the not just local but a national-wide TV. Yeah, here you can see a representative of the Doctors Against, a vice president of the Doctors Against Animal Experiments, Karina Gerik, who was being interviewed during the press conference. And among the other interesting aspects is that we were invited even to the show for the animal welfare, devoted to the animal welfare, and especially the educational process and humane education. Yeah, and lately, as soon as we have had, for instance, as I remember, like at least 10 universities, we decided to organize a nomination for the most humane university. Originally, this prize came from Russia, where it was given to one of the universities in Russia who won the prize. And lately, we decided that we can follow their example, and why not organizing the same prize in the Ukraine. And here you can see the winner, the happy winner, holding the diploma, and also as a frog statue of, yeah, that was like a good sign of of humane attitude and humane attitude towards animals.
Thank you for giving us an overview of the whole process. It's good to see, but also it's I think it really demonstrates just the amount of effort that you personally put into things, with like 3 visits in general to most of the universities all across the country. We're going to talk a little bit later, I think, about the range of the agreements and how wide things are, but clearly there's a lot of effort there, a lot of support too, especially from Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE, but you did a lot in terms of all this contact, all this outreach, all these talks, and multiple visits for each place. And we have like over 20 cities visited, and over 60 agreements across different departments, right? So there's a lot of work there, and also lots of different aspects too, from the negotiation to the meetings to the demonstrations, to the signing, to the checking, the provision of the alternatives, and then the media as well. I remember on one of the visits that I was at, I believe it was in Kharkov, and then I think you, me, and others then got a train either to Moscow or to Minsk. And we'd been on TV in Kharkov or across all of Ukraine, perhaps the day before, with Critical Care Jerry, the dog mannequin that you saw in one of the photographs, and also perhaps with Liena Maroeva, who used to be very involved in this from Russia, as one of the representatives from the Russian animal rights group Vita. So Jerry and I and you and others had been on TV, and we were on the train with Jerry out on the table, and some of the students and campaigners were having a listen to his breath and heart sounds. The conductor came along and said, "I know that dog."
I can remember. Yeah.
He'd seen this dog, Jerry, the dog mannequin, on TV the night before. So I think together we were very much reaching the national consciousness as well. It wasn't just about the individual departments and the universities, but by getting it in the media, including the TV, like the TV show you showed a photograph of, it was becoming aware. People were becoming aware at the grassroots level in the country too, weren't they?
Yeah, sure, for sure.
Okay, well, can you tell us a little bit more about the agreements specifically and the alternatives that are provided? I think you have some slides showing parts of the agreements and some more shots of the alternatives too.
Yeah, sure. Let's move to the slides. Sure. What should I say for the first? That agreements are confidential, but I will describe them and show some screenshots of content from various different documents. So first of all, between whom are these agreements? Here you can see that there are two sides, the side of the department, specific department, and the university, of course, and our organizations. So it's Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE. So I should also say that all the agreements are of legal format. Here we can see a specific table, what's inside the agreement. Yeah, it's signed inside the agreement. It's signed between the, as I said, two sides, and the most important is the table that has numbers of specific experiments at the department. Typically, that the experiments that that were in use, that the students were shown and participated, but sometimes those are the experiments that no longer in use and left from the Soviet time, but the agreement was signed to secure and to guarantee that the department will not come back in the future to that practice. And typically you can see that there are different disciplines, different courses within the discipline. For instance, it's an anatomy physiology course or pathophysiology, and a number of vertebrates and invertebrates. So here we can see just vertebrates, but also it can be invertebrates. And for our organizations, it's important that we consider all animal creatures important, and of course invertebrates are also included in the list.
And that, just going back to that table, Dima, the second column is also the type of experiment itself, isn't it? So that's the practical class itself. First the discipline, and then the individual practical class.
Yeah. So we asked the teachers to give us the detailed table and curriculum, what's scheduled for the students, and they include all the experiments for the specific department, so that nothing is hidden from us, so that the agreement is about complete replacement of all experiments at specific department. That's important to say. Yeah. And here you can see another part of the document. It says about obligations of organizations towards the department, and as you can see, it consists of two parts. So one part is the technical, which is really crucial for demonstrating the alternatives, as I previously described, that due to the poor economical background and some cost support from the government, that's really important for the teachers to get some technical means. Of course, there were some examples where universities had already some equipment and needed just a set of alternatives, but we always typically include the set of equipment and the set of specific alternatives.
Tell us about you also mentioned earlier the date of cessation of stopping of the experiments, that was typically for the next semester or 6 months or so later and then signed, yeah?
Yes, exactly. So in the agreement, it's important to underline that it's stated that we give some period of adaptation for the teachers. So sometimes, for instance, in cases when the experiments already replaced, teachers agreed to stop so that the agreement come into force immediately. But in most cases, when there are actual experiments, that we give a period of half a year typically from the moment of agreement signing for the teachers to implement the alternatives, to get to know how to work and how to demonstrate it them to the students. Yeah, so typically it's half a year period.
Thank you.
Okay. And here I should explain how we will choosing alternatives and the types, and they talk more about the sets of alternatives. So initially, when the project started, we didn't know which alternatives teachers need. So we used to ask them. For instance, we were given a link to the InterNICHE database of the alternatives, so that the teachers could or students could look through the database and choose what they like. Or at least what we could provide at that moment. Most of the alternatives are a freeware, which is actually a software with permission granted to copy and distribute. So also, some of the alternatives were created by the teachers themselves, so that they better adopted to the curriculum in the Ukraine. And here you can see a set of alternatives donated according to the agreement to the department. And here's an example of self-made alternatives that, thanks to the support from InterNICHE Doctors Against Animal Experiments, we managed to, and teachers managed to create own alternatives, own textbooks and animations that are more adapted to the curriculum. And here are the examples of these textbooks. For instance, it's the alternative methods in toxicological pharmacology, which means that it's the most among the most cruel disciplines that we had to replace. For instance, some of the alternatives provided, they didn't comply with the requests from the teachers, and we had to search opportunities within the Ukraine so that the teachers could probably create own alternatives to meet the requirements of the curriculum. And that was among the solutions. And here's another example for the alternative in digestive system. And another example from my university here is Alexander Naglov, my teacher, who replaced the cruel course of surgery when many rats were killed for surgery experiments. And he created a replacement for that course. And now the course is completely humane, and it's a good example of demonstration of alternatives in work.
Thank you. And for the development of some of the new software, I guess that involved a number of different people with different skills, or maybe from different regions as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's quite a tough work because we had to combine teachers' experience. So we involved teachers from different universities. It was a group of teachers working on specific alternatives mostly. And then we had to involve me as a coordinator and manager of the processes. And as a specialist, of course, as a physiologist, I also helped in practical development. And we were also inviting the technical staff. So the software developers, a number of people. So it's actually a team working and improving each stage of the process.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, maybe you can tell us then about the sort of the national level perspective and a little bit more on numbers. How many faculties and places across the country were you working with? And I guess this is for quite a long period of time now.
Yeah, we started just from 2 universities who joined the project 18 years ago. Yeah, and that was Kharkiv National University, my university. So I really put maximum efforts so that my faculty would become completely humane, and I won that finally, and I am really happy about it. So that's a really good example for the others. And that was also a veterinary academy in Kharkiv and the pedagogical university in Kharkiv. So we began from the 3 universities in Ukraine, and later, and finally, now it's 67 departments and more than 20 universities across Ukraine, meaning that if we open the map of Ukraine, you will see lots of dots through the whole country. So meaning that we, yeah, really have done a great job, so to say.
You have an image of that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, here you can see the cities of Ukraine involved in our project. So it's mostly all the cities, major cities of Ukraine. Next. As I said, since 2008, we have signed contracts with 67 departments in 20 cities of Ukraine. In total, more than 38,000 vertebrates, including rats, frogs, rabbits, dogs, and cats, and over 70,000 invertebrates are not killed each year. So the numbers, as you can see, the table demonstrates only it's actually a very long table, and here is just the bottom lines of the table. Here you can see the latest agreement signed. And the last one was the latest one was in January 2026 in Poltava Agriculture University. And here in the end, you can see the total numbers, which is again 20 cities, 67 departments, and the numbers of vertebrates and invertebrates replaced each year. It's really important to underline that it's each year. It's not just for the specific period of time, but it's starting from the moment of actual signing the contract and up to the following years.
So that comes to over 50,000 animals no longer used. And of course, each year that goes on, those animals in each of those departments are still not being used. So whilst the initial replacement is so crucial, I think it's really important to remember that every subsequent year where the education stays humane, no further animals being used. So the actual total number of animals not being killed is perhaps several times higher than this when you count each year progressing and the number of animals that are not being used, but software and models being used instead.
Yeah, that's really immersive, I think, huge number.
And then you mentioned that, of course, universities are have a curriculum where animals are recommended or directed to be used, but the resources at the university or perhaps across the whole country are such that the students are not really doing anything in their practical class at all. What sort of proportion would you say of animals detailed in the agreements would be experiments that are practically stopped, and what proportion would be experiments not done but still meant to be done, which the agreement then confirms that university will never go back to?
I think it's the proportion of 65 to 35%.
Okay. And I think also not going back is really important. What freedom do the universities have to change the curriculum themselves? I know in some countries things can be very centralized, and certainly the Soviet Union was very centralized. So do the teachers really have freedom to make the change? Are they doing it with approval? Are they doing it with the dean's approval, with the government's approval, with the academic council's approval, if that's what helps define it? How are they able to make that change, or do the teachers indeed have the freedom to do that themselves, like in some other countries?
Yeah, that's really a great question. As you said absolutely correctly, that during the Soviet period, it was very strict. So there was a curriculum, unique for all the universities or departments, specific departments. And for instance, in the curriculum, it was stated that like 100 rats should be used within the specific physiology course. And the specific amount of cost was provided to the university to buy or shelter the animals. So for instance, every student had to have personal animal for experiment. Yeah, and later, after the fall down of the USSR, there was a significant cut in costs provided to the university, and so it meant that sometimes students got a single animal per group, for instance, a group of students. And lately, during the independence time in Ukraine, universities became also more independent and less dependent on the financial support from the government. So some universities are self-employed,
Self-funded?
Self-funded, yeah. And it means that that by becoming that way, they are getting more rights to operate by themselves. So have the teachers, they also become more independent, and then can choose the way how they will teach, for instance, the students. And I can show a bright example when sometimes teachers make a phone call to me asking if there is any alternatives, because they just don't want to kill animals. They for somebody it's really unacceptable. For instance, when a teacher moves from one university where there was no experiments to another one, and he or she discovers that there are experiments, and then it shocks, and the teacher phones me and asks that I need help from your side, from your organizations, and it means that the teacher can choose the way either to use experiments, use animals, or don't. So it became easier, I think.
I remember with one of the first agreements that InterNICHE had in Russia before the Ukraine project really got going to this degree. With St. Petersburg State Veterinary Academy, we began with one department that was open to things, and gave them a grant linked to our humane education award, which was a grant program at the time supported by Proef de Vrij, the Dutch animal protection organization. And they were very successful within that department, but they also were going against what the government had mandated in terms of animal use for the class. So there was a bit of tension there, but they decided that this really was the best way to go forward. New technology with software, a good resource, Jerry, critical care Jerry, the dog mannequin, which they integrated into the pharmacology course. But they were also to some degree going against what they were meant to do. But following on from that, other departments started to see the benefits of the alternatives. Their colleagues in other universities started to see that these alternatives were providing a much better way of learning, a way of teaching. And then even the more difficult departments like physiology and pathophysiology started to open and want to listen, want to negotiate, and finally sort of replace. So yeah, sometimes the individual freedom is quite an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely agree with you.
Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the motivation of universities before we look at maybe what's happened beyond Ukraine. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the situation with the collapse of centralized funding, with the collapse of the Soviet Union in Ukraine and Russia and elsewhere. Sometimes there was no money to even buy animals or keep animals. So the students didn't have any learning tools, whether good learning tools or bad learning tools at all. What were the students doing in their practical class if they had so few resources?
Actually, they had a few animals. Yeah, mostly there was not such a big problem to have at least a few animals. So every university has a vivarium where the animals are kept. And at least some of the animals were used, first of all. But that really stimulated the teachers searching for alternatives. So they had a plan, they had a curriculum, and they had to demonstrate some classical physiological processes, for instance, and by the means that they had for that period of time, they couldn't do it completely. So that made the teachers searching for alternatives, and that was really helpful for us because they were becoming more open-minded and were seeking for alternatives to what they have.
So they had a difficult situation, and the alternatives helped provide an exit, a solution for it.
Yeah, in every difficult situation, it's best for us then. I mean, that it stimulates it happens like that. Yeah, maybe unfortunately, I don't know, fortunately, that any critical situation for the university makes better for providing alternatives and animal rights and talking more about that. So that the changes were good for us, and they made a great background for us.
And the teachers were convinced about the quality of the alternatives, that they could meet standard teaching objectives better.
We had to explain it. I think that the teachers simply didn't know anything about it. As I said before, they implemented own created alternatives, but they didn't consider them fully, and they didn't see the full advantages, and they just had a narrow vision. And we helped to widen it. We helped to demonstrate many more alternatives available globally. And some of them were really shocking experience to the teachers, for instance, as Jerry, as you said before, as you mentioned before, and virtual reality alternatives. So many alternatives were really new to the teachers.
And this was also about modernization and use of new technology. You mentioned that there were sometimes very few computers available, and this was a chance to sort of modernize and take a big step forward in terms of education and a more digital environment.
Yeah, I think it brought really great advantages for the educational process in all aspects, starting from pedagogical aspect and up to technical, modernized approach, and of course, animal rights, students' rights, university aura, I would say, university
Reputation.
reputation. Yeah, it's better. But okay. So yes, it's everybody benefited. It's a win-win solution.
And legislation within Ukraine, you mentioned briefly that the government was supportive of the use of technology in education. Was it mainly that legislation, or was there also legislation pushing for alternatives?
In 2006, there was accepted a law. The law was accepted by the government for the animal rights. It was about in general for animal welfare, but there was some paragraph stating the rights of students and the rights of animals in higher education. It states that alternatives should always be used unless not available, or so meaning that each university should seek for humane approach rather than using animals. Among the other paragraph, it was stated that a student has complete right to deny participating in experiment. So a student can ask a teacher to not be involved in the experiments on animals. And in this case, a teacher or the department, the university should provide this student or a group of students with respective alternatives.
And of course, if everyone is using alternatives only, then you don't even need to think about that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Was that usually the case, that they were provided for everyone in the agreements, or was it access for only some students who might have conscientiously objected to the experiments? Were they implemented for everyone?
In case that we sign agreement with specific department, yes, of course, the alternatives available for all students within the department, or sometimes even the teachers shared the alternatives to neighboring departments. And in case they didn't sign agreement for us, but the student would require alternative, it should be considered specifically. I can't say for sure, but maybe a specific student could get access to some alternatives from the teachers, but not the whole class. So I don't know. I can't say for sure.
Okay, but the formal agreements were ones that ended all animal use or all harmful animal use within the department. That was part of the basis of the agreement in every case. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, maybe we can move on a little bit to some of the challenges before we go further. Obviously, there were some very difficult cases. I know from my experience, physiology departments with a photograph, with a painting of Ivan Pavlov in every room. Often the physiology departments didn't even want to talk to us at first, and gradually became more interested in pathophysiology, a particular area of study more from former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, was also particularly cruel, very severe experiments, a lot of animals used. How did you deal with some of these departments and some of the teachers in those departments and elsewhere who didn't really want to listen or collaborate?
That's really a good question. Thank you. I should say open-heartedly that the process didn't go smoothly all the time. So it wasn't that easy in most cases, especially in the very beginning, when the teachers, of course, like for the specific department, there were some teachers open-minded, so to say, and some teachers really conservative. So, for instance, during the initial visit, I met a group of teachers. They were like circling me and asking some really uncomfortable questions. Yeah, I had to answer, but luckily I was in the field, so I was a physiologist. It's not that I'm from some other field, so I knew what to answer because first of all I had my own experience with alternatives and my own experience with replacement of animals, and then of course I had to explain. I think that the main problem was that the conservative teachers didn't know much about alternatives. It's really a bit strange. I can't say it funny, but teachers didn't see the whole picture. I mean, the conservative teachers, they didn't know about the benefits of alternatives, and they, especially old school teachers and more older teachers, they didn't want to switch to alternatives because, yeah, I just remembered, they were afraid of computers because they didn't know how to work with computers. That was the problem. And they were afraid that once the alternatives would be implemented by younger teachers, that younger teachers would replace older teachers. And that was really scareful to them. So I had to explain that it's really easy to work with alternatives. It's not that complicated, even though that alternatives, most of the alternatives are English, or sometimes German, but you don't need to know a language. It's really easy to work with the software, and I showed how to work. I demonstrated different alternatives to the teachers, and yeah, there was some, of course, tough discussions. I can remember the toughest when we had at Donetsk Medical University, and the most cruel departments were typically pathophysiology and toxical pharmacology departments. But here is an example of pathophysiology department. When there was a scandal of animals being kept in proper conditions in vivarium, and they had through several, up to 5 operations, and that was in the media. And finally, that was a great pressure exert to the rector of the university, and the rector itself had to find a solution to that problem. And then he asked his assistant, who finally contacted me, and I was invited to the pathophysiology department, and again was surrounded by old-fashioned school teachers who were really considered me maybe crazy because they put specifically a number of scientific books in pathophysiology, trying to frighten me, maybe. I don't know, trying to say that like what you are going to say, it's nonsense. So the science is not about alternatives, it's about cruel experiments. And I had to withstand by myself. Of course, I felt myself really uncomfortable, and I was the only one among the other 7 persons in the room. But I managed to keep myself patient and step by step explained all the advantages of alternatives and how it really impacts the future of the university even, and it will benefit for the students and teachers. And luckily, I should also mention that this success at that specific department was due to the young scientist who was on our side, and that was really helpful because he was open-minded, and that's his thing to say. We are really always welcome and open-minded persons, and it's always pleasant to meet such persons, and typically we call them key persons in our cooperation with the universities. So they help us greatly, being even sometimes they being a chain between them and their colleagues, so that they help to pass on their experience even for other departments, and that's how we finally sign agreement with them, with the other departments. Yeah, and finally we have done that project thanks to mutual efforts, mine and as a young scientist, who later helped us to create an alternative in pathological physiology, by the way.
And I think that's also what you mentioned before about language being important. Software that's also available in Ukrainian and Russian for specific courses that might not be so international. Many courses, many practical classes for knowledge and skills are very international, very much the same across the world, but there are some differences, aren't there, between countries. So making the physiology and the pathophysiology software and translating it really helped with the process of implementation and the replacement of the experiments.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. I think you have some slides of going beyond Ukraine, a little bit about what else happened beyond the borders. Obviously, Ukraine is a very large country. You mentioned that as a challenge, but also an opportunity. But you and others and I have also been to other countries to do outreach and look into agreements too.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Soon after that success in the Ukraine, I had an idea, why not offering the same experience to other ex-US countries, because we have had the same curriculum, the same problems, and that's how began the outreach to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and later other countries. So I was doing the same. I was trying to search the web for the universities that may use animals, and just simply pick up in the phone and calling to the heads of departments and posting of letters and messages through email to the specific universities, and some of them replied. And that's how our outreach began. And that was a really great success in my mind. Some agreements were signed during that trip, and some agreements were signed later, so that the teachers some of the teachers were not ready to sign the agreement straight away, but I think more than 50% signed agreements straight away during our visits.
And there were some other countries as well that didn't directly involve you, but I know that the broader project involving Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE also looked into other regions, like we can see in the slide. Do you have some images of Uzbekistan?
So here the image of Tashkent Medical University. That was me and you presenting the alternatives to the group of teachers and students. By the way, it should be mentioned that I was really shocked by the number of computers they had. Typically, we don't expect that the university would be so rich in technical means. But in Uzbekistan, we were told that the specific faculty had access to 100 of computers, especially I think that was a separate auditorium packed with computers, and some extra were kept in case of some technical problems. So that was really interesting experience, unusual. Here you can see students exploring the alternatives. There was a huge interest to the alternatives because, again, that was new, completely new to most of the teachers and students. And here you can see photos from Iran, that soon after the Uzbekistan journey, Nick went to Iran, then part of our outreach to that country. And here are the discussions between the teachers and Nick.
So let me just see what else we haven't really addressed. I know that there were some other challenges too, both the war, and also I think you mentioned Donetsk earlier, but you have some slides showing some of the problems that the war has been causing.
Yeah.
And then also some slides referring back to this problem in Donetsk with the students. Could you show us those?
Yes, of course. Wait a second. The war in the Ukraine really made a great impact on higher education in the Ukraine. I should say that higher education institutions have suffered severe, and they got really much damage. By the end of 2014, 11 universities had been completely destroyed and more than almost 300 damaged. Of course, the heaviest losses were recorded in eastern part of Ukraine, which is much more affected by Russian attacks. That is typically Kharkiv, my city, Donetsk, which is now occupied by Russia, Zaporizhia, Chernihiv, and Mykolaiv regions, which is in the south. So, for instance, in Kharkiv, 21 of 24 institutions were affected as early as 2022. And this damage includes academic buildings, classrooms, laboratories, sports facilities, and dormitories. And despite these losses, many universities have continued operating online or have relocated to safer regions. For instance, I can give an example that when we signed an agreement with Donetsk University, later it moved to Lutsk, to the western part of Ukraine, which is the safer part. And it should be mentioned that universities operating in eastern part of Ukraine, they switched to online education. They had to switch to online education. Though the universities in Kyiv, when we were in the beginning of war, it was 2022, 2023, when I visited Kyiv, they also suffered from attacks, but Kharkiv was affected the most. But the Kyiv universities continued offline classes. I don't know what's been happening there since that time. Maybe, as you may know, that the Russian attacks may have been more severe since that to Kyiv region. So I don't know if they switched to online classes from offline. But yeah, now situation is much worse in Kyiv.
And of course, the use of alternatives feeds into that as well.
As well as the COVID example, when the universities, some of the universities switched to online classes, the war impacted the online the education in the way that teachers required only alternatives because no other ways to use animals for that. So that's also a benefit for our project that teachers and students are intensively looking towards alternatives. And here you can see the example of Kharkiv Pedagogical University. We signed the agreement among the first applicants, and a missile called Iskander landed at night. And of course, as you may see, that's just a high institution, no military is here. So it was awful act, and students, yeah, you can see another image of destruction, and that's really a sad situation. Luckily, it was one of the buildings, and the university has, as I may remember, 5 buildings, but one of them was completely destroyed. And that is also applicable to other universities in eastern parts of Ukraine. They have more or less the same destructions.
And then I think you have some slides about Donetsk, is that right?
We are going to talk about the animal abuse and the protests. So it happened in, I think, 2004, when there was a scandal, as I mentioned, in Donetsk Medical University due to the fact that students were pressed to catch stray animals and bring them to the university for experiments. And the practice was that some animals had to go through a row of operations, and they were kept in awful conditions in a vivarium, and the feces of animals were not cleared, and they had to survive even without proper food supplied by anyone. And of course, that brought much attention from both students and media, and even the European Union media broadcasted that event. You can see another image of a poor animal waiting for another experiment. And yeah.
These were surgery experiments?
Medical university, and I think they were used in pathophysiology. That was a pathophysiology, physiology experiments, Pavlov's experiments, maybe, of course, as the classical ones, and some other experiments. So, yeah, and that's, I think, the most awful examples of use of animals, and that was typical for veterinary, specifically veterinary and medical universities. Yeah. And later we managed, as I mentioned before, to sign an agreement due to the pressure from the media, that the rector had to change something, change the way they act towards animals, and they found us, and then there was a tough discussion with the teachers that I mentioned, and then finally, thanks to the young scientists, we managed to create a pathophysiology software. And yeah, and I should also mention that it was really hard for us to make a replacement there initially, because we couldn't offer anything in English or any other languages, because typically there is no pathophysiology as a separate discipline in European Union, as I know. And the best way could be is to create a specific alternative for the pathophysiology, what we finally did, and it actually allowed us to broaden the area of replacement, so that we could use the same software for other pathophysiology departments, not only in the Ukraine, but even abroad, in Russia, Belarus, etc.
And the agreements at these universities also helped end, or did end, over the annual use of over 5,000 animals.
Yes, exactly.
So that's one of the most significant agreements there. We got very little time left, Dima, so perhaps you could just show us the last of those slides.
Yeah, here the really good picture of release of some frogs stated in the agreements of in physiology course, typically where the most frogs are used. So that was a positive note in all the awful picture that we had. And maybe we'll switch to the Lush Prize now.
Sure. Tell us about this.
Okay, that was really a bright light in my life, and that was really I didn't expect that. Of course, I would really dream about it, but finally it happened, so that I was nominated for the Lush Prize, and as acceptance of the great job done by not just me, of course, but the organizations, firstly, I should say, and that without their support, the Lush Prize wouldn't be possible at all. And I'm really grateful for the support from Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE. And that gave me a really good push towards further progress in the Ukraine, and that made me see the broader picture and to get experience from the colleagues all around the globe.
If you had to reflect on the whole situation and talk about how things are now and what's going to happen next, could you make a few very brief comments to sort of summarize some of what you said?
Yeah, of course. So for the moment, the situation is quite hard for the Ukraine. As you may know, the war continues, and it means that some more universities are damaged, and some more universities have to switch to online classes. Yet it's maybe better news for us, so that we can widely promote alternatives. But actually, we don't need to promote, because in the latest periods, teachers are searching for us themselves. So typically, we don't make any promotion. It's done by the teachers, or the teachers we had agreement with. So as you can see, another slide of destructions made by missile, and temporarily the project is put on hold for the uncertainty, and we don't know how the situation will be the next months. But let's hope for the better, of course. And as soon as it becomes better, the project will be continued for sure. We keep on receiving new requests from the teachers, and we are helping them greatly by providing, for instance, a freeware. Yeah, and they are waiting for the technical support, which will become possible, I think, as soon as there will be an opportunity for that. Here is another image, right image, showing that teachers continue the educational process even under the attacks, and even when the central heating was off thanks to the attacks. And as you may see, the thermometer shows 0 centigrade, and teachers still working. And that's about the Ukrainians, I think. That's in our character, that we withstand any problem, and we unite as never, and we can win, and we can win for us, we can win for the animals, and we can continue living. And yeah, I think everything should be fine. Finally, we are hoping so, at least.
Do you think the attitude towards animals, towards humane education, has changed nationwide?
Yes, sure, greatly. Yeah, comparing to what we had in the very beginning and through the years, 18 years, that's a really huge number of years. It changed greatly. I think everybody knows about alternatives nowadays, and people, we don't need to explain what they are, what the benefits of them are, because typically teachers contact us by themselves. They know who we are, and they just want changes, and that's a bright example, I think, and shows of what's happening now for this period of time.
Thank you very, very much for that. If people want to find out more, you have some contact details, websites for people to look at?
You're really welcome to visit our project's website with a full information about through the history and some freeware to download, and about the animal rights, students' rights, and the progress and the future thoughts. So you are very welcome to visit the main website and also the supportive websites of the organizations, Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE. And of course, very welcome to write me on email anytime.
Well, it's been wonderful to hear such a detailed and extended exploration of the work. I want to say a big congratulations for all the effort that you've been putting into this over the years. You've been very, very motivated and put a huge amount of effort into it, including in recent years under extremely difficult circumstances, while you're still sometimes traveling in the country by train, meeting teachers and delivering alternatives. So big congratulations. As you said, it's also very, very, very big input from Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE to a degree. So that's been that looks at the broader sort of picture, but none of it could have been done without your input. So thank you again for all that work and also for the presentation today. I'm going to finish now on just with one or two questions, if other people have any comments that people would say. We have a comment from one person saying, thank you very much for this important work and inspirational webinar. And thank you to us for the presentation. Does anyone have any specific questions for Dima, or have we really covered everything in this extended interview and presentation? One question about donations. Is there a platform where people can make donations, or is that a matter for people to contact Doctors Against Animal Experiments and InterNICHE to feed in any potential funds?
Yeah, exactly. So it's best to contact the organizations.
Okay. Another question here on the whole seminar. Is it going to be available? Yes, it's been recorded, and there'll be minor editing, and that will be available soon through the different organizations organizing the webinar series. So that, yes, it will be available. Concerning virtual physiology, this is the software that Dr. Hans Brown has been behind for many years, producing for lots of simulations of classical nerve and muscle and other physiology softwares to enhance teaching. I know Hans and I, if Hans doesn't write further, I know Hans and I were talking briefly yesterday about the possibility of availability of some of his software in Ukraine. So that might be something that we can investigate in the near future to see what might be possible for availability there.
We have another question, I think.
Yes, well, Hans, whilst you're writing, Susanna Gomez is saying, to convince professors on a case-by-case basis, what approach did you take? Did you visit them individually, contact them by email, or use another method? Did the fact that other universities already implement alternatives help convince them?
Yeah, I did all that.
All these different methods, yeah.
Yes, of course. So it depended on the specific case.
Okay.
Yeah, but I combined all of them.
Okay. And another person is asking, are you available for new projects in other countries?
What it means? Yes, of course, I'm always open for anything specifically concerning the replacement of animal use in education.
And I guess you can also give advice to others who might want to do similar work in their country, yeah?
Yeah, that's another question. Can you assist in providing humane alternatives not only to education, but also in scientific work groups? I may try, but that's not that's out of my field, to tell the truth. So I mostly concentrated in the educational process. That's where I specialized, so to say.
Okay, another final comment. Thank you for the presentation. Very motivating and encourages others to pursue a similar approach. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Valentin has posted the link and the information about the next webinar in the series, which is 14th of April at 7 p.m. CET, and there's the information there, and the registration link is posted in the chat there, and that will also be available through all the organizations who are part of this webinar series, CAT, InterNICHE and Ombion. So you'll get information on the relevant websites and social media for that. Is there anything you wanted to add further on about the next event, Valentin?
I think it was well resumed, Nick. I would like also to thank Dima for this great presentation today, an inspiration talk. Thanks also, Nick, for organizing it. And thanks to all of you that followed us. And we really invite you to also be present next month. You have the details in the chat, and you can also scan the QR code here. I think we had all a great time. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Valentin, for some of the practical and technical aspects contributing to the event. So Dima, thank you again. Thank you everyone who's come to listen. Sorry for the slight overrunning, but I hope you all enjoyed it and hopefully see you at the next event. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye bye.